All right, good evening, everyone. This is Landreth. We're going to have our eBible interview tonight. And this evening we have Bobby Seavey. How are you, Bobby?
I'm good, Landreth. How are you?
Fine, thank you, by God's mercies. So, Bobby, if you can share with us your when was the start of your Christian journey, and how did you start listening?
So I grew up, in mostly a secular household with some Catholic influence that had been passed down in the family. And we would never go to church, but I would go to this, what they called CCD, which was like an after school program. So that was when I would get a little instruction on God at that time. But it was not I don't remember much about it. We never really got into the Bible. The Catholics really don't spend a lot of time in the Bible, at least not in that program. And so it was basically, we kind of pulled out of there not that long. Maybe I just did that for a few years, and then that was it. And then basically, we had the Bible in the house, but I never read it. We had a King James and a paraphrased version. And I had ended up, by the time I was in high school, I had met someone at a store that I used to go to, and we were friends just for a short amount of time. And then when I got to college, we had bumped into each other there, and we started talking, and we became friends. And he was into the Bible, and he was into church. He would ask me if I wanted to go to church, and I never wanted to go, not because I thought the church age was over. I just wasn't interested in it. So he was the first time that I really met someone that was really interested in the Bible. But from there, he was also very much into the world as I was. And from there, he had given me a Bible. He said, don't read the King James Bible, read the NIV. So eventually I started to read it. I was probably in my early 20s. I read the NIV New Testament. And then I started to read the Old Testament, and I couldn't get through it. Like, I just lost interest in it. I thought it was boring. So I just dropped it. And then over time, I was very much into reading books and other things in the world. And they would refer to the Bible and they'd make reference to it. And I said, you know what, I've never read the Bible. I've read all these books, but I've never read the Bible. So I decided on New Year's Day in 2006, I'm gonna start reading the Bible, and I'm not gonna read anything else until I finish it. So I started to do that, and it was the NIV Study Bible. It had these notes in it, and I would go through it and I'd read it. And during the middle of this, so around April, I was into the New Testament at that point, and my mom had told me about family radio. Because she was watching TV, and we had WFME. I live in New Jersey. We had WFME TV there. And she said, there's some guy talking about the Bible on TV. The stations changed. Like, the station she was watching switch. And sometimes the cable companies renumber the stations, and it became Family Radio TV. So I put it on, and it was Harold Camping, and it was like an open forum or something. And I watched it, and I thought it was interesting. And then nothing really came of it right away. Like, it was just like a slow, I would just sort of turn it on, I'd watch him, and here and there. And then just a couple of weeks later, I was in my car at lunch at work, and I was driving to a store, and my hand slipped. I had the radio on, and my hand slipped, and all of a sudden I hear the Bible being read on the radio, which I would later realize was Family Bible Reading Fellowship, Henrik Van Dyke. So I heard that, and I said, oh, okay. And then eventually I was able to figure out that this was the same thing, that Family Radio was the same as the TV. When I first saw Harold Camping, I thought he was just some local guy. I didn't realize the TV productions were, wasn't as good as the radio. Like, it looked kind of low budget. I thought he was just like a local guy. I didn't realize that he was nationwide or worldwide. So I started listening to family radio, and I started to really like it. And I felt like it was really, I was just fascinated by it. And I loved listening to Harold Camping, Dwayne Spencer, and then later I got into Robert Cook. And I was just constantly listening to it. And I loved the study so much. And so then when I went back to the friend that I had, and I said, "How, I'm getting more into the Bible now, and I'm listening to family radio." And so he didn't like that at all. Like he didn't want to hear anything about what Harold Camping had to say. He predicted 1994, and I don't listen to him. I said, "Oh, all right." So then I just dropped it. I didn't talk about it, and he didn't get into it either. So so that takes you up to that point, and then from there, I eventually transitioned over to eBible Fellowship closer to 2011. I would say around January of 2011. I had wanted to go through Mr. Camping's Biblical Timeline of History. That was like a family Bible study program, and I was very far behind in that. There was like 600 studies, so I came up with this plan where I'm going to finish this in 2 years. I'm going to listen to the whole thing, which would be like 7 studies a week. And well, I wanted to finish by the end of 2010, and so I did. And then at that point, I somehow got over to eBible Fellowship's website, and I saw that they had a bunch of studies there that I had not listened to. So I was listening to those here and there, and then I heard Chris. I had heard Chris on family radio during the Lord's Day study. I didn't really listen to Echoes, but on Sundays, some of you might remember there was a Lord's Day study program. It was on 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. That was where I first heard the eBible Fellowship guys. And so from there, once I got to the website, then I really started to focus more on that. And I heard Chris do a study, which I had mentioned once before. It was called "Do You See the Sword Coming?" And it was about Balaam and the donkey, and he was riding, and how the angel of Jehovah appeared, and Balaam couldn't see him, but the donkey could. And I just thought that was such a great study, and Chris really got my attention with that. And from then, I really wanted to listen to everything Chris was doing, and as well as Guy. I was really listening to both of them a lot at that point, leading up to May 21st. And then really, well, that kind of covers it, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, there's more I could get into, but that's kind of a summary of it.
Okay. So around 2006, again, at this point, Mr. Camping had already started teaching about the church age was over. And then at that point, it seemed, around 2006, a lot of new information was coming out, things that we never heard before, those that were in the church, for a while. So how was that for you, hearing, some of these, this new doctrine, like, the lamb slain from the foundation, and there's no eternal hell, and Christ didn't pay for sin at the cross. How was that for you, being that, again, you were in the church, but you weren't? So how did that, hearing this new information, how did that grab you?
Yeah. Well, when I first started listening, he was talking right away about the end of the church age. And at first I thought that was a little strange, like when he was talking about Satan ruling in the congregations, and that, you had to get out of your church. And I thought that was a little strange at first, hearing that. It just, it sounded a little out there. That was my initial thought on it. I remember during that period in 2006, I also listened to some other pastors here and there, not for a long period of time, but I remember going to, there was one that I read a few books by him, and I thought he had died probably in the early 90s. And there was a church in New York City, and I was in the city, and I said, "Oh, it'd be nice to go there just to see where it was." And I went, and I remember getting a copy of their sermons, and I remember looking at it, not their sermons, but I guess a church brochure. And I remember looking at it, and it was just a little strange. It was clear, they weren't following the Bible. I think they had women, a women teacher or something, a women pastor, and they had some kind of a homosexual group. And I remember thinking, this is totally contrary to the Bible. why would they be doing this? Like, so that was like an early like red flag for me on that. But yeah, as far as the other doctrines, they came out pretty quick when I was listening. So the annihilation and not hell is not a place, and then the atonement. I mean, the one thing was, the doctrines weren't so entrenched like with me. Like I wasn't so, like, I mean, hell, I mean, I was familiar with hell as a place, growing up, of course, everybody's familiar with that. But I didn't like react negatively to it. Like I wasn't like, oh, this isn't true. Like I saw it, the way Mr. Camping went to the scriptures, it looked true. And the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, I thought was a very kind of blow you away idea at the time.
Right. So so going forward, 2011, at that point, where were you?
2011. I mean, where was I? What do you mean? Like, where do you mean? Where
As
was
far
I?
as, at this point, you were listening to eBible, I guess, and
Mhm.
family radio a lot. Were you involved in 2011 in any capacity?
Yeah, not a lot, not until the end. I had a really hard time witnessing. Like that was not something that came naturally to me. Very introverted. Like it was hard for me to just go out there and, start telling everybody about Judgment Day coming. That I had a really hard time doing that. I had gone to the eBible Fellowship Conference in April of 2011, and that was the first time I met anybody involved at all. Like, so I was just totally on my own. I didn't know anybody at all that was interested in
Okay.
eBible, that listened to family radio. No one. So when I went to the conference, that was a real like eye-opening and experience for me, because I got to meet others, and I got to get on what was some of you, I'm sure many of you were on this, Tom Holt's email address distribution list.
Right.
And I got on that after coming back from that. And then I got emails, and he would let people know about like local tract distributions. And from there, I saw one that was not far from where I lived, and I went. So that was the first time that I had ever gone out and handed out tracts before. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is so much easier than I thought it was going to be. Like I thought it was going to be like so much harder, like just going up to people individually and speaking to them about it, where you can just sort of stand on a corner with your hand out. That to me was a lot easier than I was expecting. So from there, that last month, I was out there doing, like, there was a lot of local trips to New Jersey that people were doing. And I was, out there with, I didn't never like wrap my car. I mean, when I pulled into the conference in April, all these cars were wrapped and everybody had t-shirts. I mean, I had none of that. So I ended up getting the t-shirt and the hat and the bumper sticker, and I did all that leading up to May 21st.
Okay. Yeah, and I identify with that because for a long period, about 5 years, we had a track group in New York City subway, and we met every Sunday. And the reason we started the group, because initially it was just two of us. And then we had the thought, maybe there's others, because I remember speaking to someone and they said that they were shy and they could never do it on their own. And it always stayed in the back of my mind. So I wondered if and I mentioned it to the guy that used to come out with me, if there would be others that if they knew there was a group that they can join, that they would love to come out. And sure enough, so we had it announced on the radio at that time, family radio. And sure enough, the group like really evolved, and a lot of people started coming out. And we saw how some people like yourself was initially shy and could never do it on their own. Once they came out, like you said, and they saw it wasn't that bad, and their confidence was, built up, then some of them branched off from us and went back into their own neighborhoods and what have you, or formed other little groups, and they started, handing out tracts on their own. So how was it after May 22nd how, how was that for you, that period? Because I know for all of us, it was a really, it was a dark time. It was, nobody had answers. How was that for you? You know, how did you handle that?
So I would say, I was very disappointed. I was upset. And, especially that Sunday, May 22nd, I remember that was a really tough day. I remember just even having a hard time praying that day. Like, it was just a real, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just a great disappointment is what it was. But, by God's grace, I kept listening to Chris. He was doing those studies on the end of captivity and captive during that summer. And I remember thinking at first, maybe we need to start reevaluating some of this. I was questioning it a little bit. And when, Chris had done that study in Acts 16 with Paul and Silas in jail, and they prayed, and there was that great earthquake, and then all the prisoners were freed. And that really made a huge impact, I thought, at the time. Like, it really explain what was going on. And Chris was really the only one talking about it. And when that study came out, I really felt like it was a spiritual earthquake. And then he continued on through that summer, going through things, and we looked forward to October 21st. So yeah, I mean, I still listen to Mr. Camping after that, and then, but that's really when the transition occurred over to Chris.
Yeah, the same with me. Same thing. Right after May 21st, I used to visit eBible from here and there. I heard about Pal Talk, but I never tuned into Pal Talk. But right after May 21st, May 22nd, May 23rd onward is when I started listening to eBible, and like you said, it was that transition, but very quickly, we eventually, by God's mercies, we started seeing that it was a spiritual judgment. I was glad to hear Mr. Camping say that it was a spiritual judgment. And then, things started picking up. So going forward, at what point did you start getting more involved with eBible? Because you obviously have a lot to do with eBible. You're involved with the panel discussion and other features. When did you start, really working with eBible Fellowship?
So it was around 2016. I had written to Chris, and he was talking about getting some more music on, looking for, at that time, trying to get music on the broadcast. And to do that, we would, he would say, you'd find some musicians out there, and you'd write to them and say, we're looking to broadcast. Would you mind giving us permission? We didn't, at that time, there was no music license. We couldn't just air anything that we bought online. So I had wrote to him about that, and he told me what to do. And then from there, I started to write to musicians and ask them for permission. And that's not really like a fun thing to do. I mean, sometimes you would get permission here and there. But most of the time, as soon as they heard it was for eBible Fellowship, they would, usually just not respond to you at all. So, but from doing that, that got me to find out about more music that's out there. And what eventually that led to was, once the ministry obtained the music license, some of that music that I had found or was looking for, it was helpful. And it was almost like not the dress rehearsal, but it was the preliminary working as far as us getting more music on the broadcast. And from there, I got more and more involved with the ministry each year, I would say. I had worked on I was working on this my own personal thing, these types and figures list, where I would, all the different studies I would on the computer and like a Microsoft Word file, I would, put like if David was a type of Christ and, 1 Samuel 17 when he fought Goliath, and I would list all the types and figures. I really like the types and figures features that were on YouTube at that time. That was like my favorite. And so I put together this whole list and I sent it to Chris and I said, if you ever, maybe this would help just if you ever going to do new types and figures. And he had asked me if I wanted to write them. And that was not the reaction that I was expecting to get from him. And so I started to do that. That was in 2017. I started to work on I started writing them, but I really didn't write them. It was really, what I did was I was more of the editor. I took Chris's studies from the transcripts and put things together from that. So I would just pull from various different studies here and there. So the later ones, that's what I did. And then John would record them and we post them on YouTube. And that was, I was involved with that in 2017. And then starting in 2018, I got more involved with the broadcasts, with the scheduling. That was when we transitioned over to a new broadcast setup with Carl, and Carl had set it up and I had worked on it with him, as well as what he mentioned in his interview too with the website. I started to work on him with the website when we transitioned over to eBibleFellowship.org. That was in 2018. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed and I just was involved in various programs, scheduling them, uploading files to the website, things like that.
So you're pretty busy.
Yeah, it's busy. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but it must be a blessing too, because being involved with the ministry and obviously like you said, doing the types and figures, you have to do your research, your homework. So you are spending a lot of time in the scriptures. I'm quite sure that's causing you to spend more time in the scriptures and reviewing the information from the studies and comparing the Bible verses. So how is that helping you in your daily walk? Because as Christians, I mean, and this is a question that is basically my theme for when I interview, how is the studies, the Bible itself, helping you in this time? Because living in the day of judgment, we're all in the fire and we all have our different trials and so forth. And there's many trials. How is this helping you in your daily walk? Spending so much time in the scriptures.
I mean, there's administrative work, so it's not quite as much in the scriptures as I would like it to be.
Okay.
But so it's not. I mean, some of the, I'm not, some of the work has shifted over time. Like I'm not doing the types and figures now at all. That's on hold. The scheduling, I'm doing less. Albert Cray is now doing the bulk of the scheduling. I just do a small part of it now. So things kind of like the work kind of shifted over time. But I mean, for me, the thing about with the studies and the encouragement is, you listen to, like, you just go through the Genesis studies and it's really amazing that all the things that's in there that, you just never would have seen if you were to just read through the chapter. And the depth of the studies, the insight that we're getting into our current day, which is coming out very often. We're getting more insight into the day of judgment. So it's really locking things in. Like, we know we're on the right track. Like, I feel like, the scriptures are given for evidence, in 2 Timothy 3:16, that word reproof is also translated as evidence, and all scripture is given for evidence. And I feel like that's how God works. He gives us like the Isaiah 24 studies in 2012, when Chris went through that chapter, it really locked in the fact that judgment was upon the earth. And I feel like God is just further locking that in. And with each year, we're more and more seeing it, that the Bible contains many references to Judgment Day, that we would live through it. It would be a prolonged period of time. here is the patience of the saints. I mean, there were so many things we've learned over the years. So to me, that is the blessing, is the fact that we're learning more and more about the time that we're in, and we know we're on the right track.
Yes. Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. And I find it personally a joy because, I often flash back to, the day after May 21st. And now looking at how much information, and like you said, when if I remember correct, I believe it was after October 7th, 2015. And Chris said, okay, we're going to start in Genesis 1:1. And I know, like, I had a little sinking feeling at first, like, man, are we going back to, I didn't know what to think. Like, we're going back to just basics. And so much has come out of the Genesis stuff. I mean, what a blessing. And it's a joy for me because to know that we're on the right track. It's confirming I'm so happy that you guys are doing the book review because it's really confirming that, yes, we're on the right track. Mr. Camping, yeah, there was corrections. His understanding to a point was limited, because he was focused on May 21st, but not entirely, because he also had, in I believe it was 1994, he also had for a small bit 2033 as a possibility. So it's a joy to know that all the work that God used Mr. Camping for was not in vain. He wasn't off base. We weren't misled or anything and God is just, like you said, as we go on, he's locking it in more and more. What happened, what time we're in now, the day of judgment, and Lord willing, where we're going. And in the midst of, again, the daily trials and so forth, it's such a joy. The studies and what we're learning, and God is, it's almost like we're back in a sense, like 2006, 7, when so much an abundance of information was opening up, things that we never heard. And now I kind of feel, for me at least, that we're kind of like almost in that point, because now God is opening up so many things. Now we clearly see that we're following the pattern of the Lord Jesus Christ. We clearly see, how did we miss that? But it was all part of God's plan. And it's just a joy to know that, yes, we're on the right track. God is blessing eBible, the teachers at eBible, and, and I pray and I encourage others to pray for those, working behind the scenes, yourself and many others that are behind the scenes and, and helping the ministry. And it's just really, really a joy. It's really a joy. Do you have any words, any words of encouragement to a new listener, someone that this is all new to them, but God is obviously drawing them? Do you have any words of encouragement, and even a verse of encouragement or two?
Well, I mean, for a newer listener, I mean, for me, 2 Corinthians 5:17, about, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. That and the verse in Galatians chapter 6 about, but God forbid that I should glory save in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom the world is crucified unto me, and I unto the world. Those were key verses for me, as far as the transition, the shift that occurs in your life after salvation, when old things are passing away and you're looking at everything now through the lens of the Word of God as a filter. And so, your life changes tremendously. And all the things that, a lot of the things that you used to do have to be pushed away and thrown away forever. And that's a hard thing to go through. And the trials and the temptations are really difficult during that time. I know since salvation ended, it's a little bit different now, but everybody has to go through that to some degree as God, cleanses the sin in your life. So those verses for that. I mean, for the current day, in Nahum chapter 1, about that Jehovah is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knoweth them that trust in him. That verse I like a lot. Just about God being the defense, that God is our defense and protector and our shield and our exceeding great reward.
Okay. Well, Bobby, I would like to thank you for your time and sharing your hope and your experience, and like to thank everyone for tuning in this Lord's Day evening, and we'd like to mention for everyone to pray for the ministry, and those working at the ministry. Pray for the Bible teachers, because it's not an easy job, I'm quite sure. And to whatever way that we can help and take serious the feeding of God's sheep, and just to continue studying the Word, and checking things out. So again, this is Landreth. I'd like to thank everyone and thank Bobby, and may the Lord richly bless all of his elect people. Good night.